Airports that were once the pride of America, true gateways to the world, have now become ghost towns. The number of international passengers has decreased by 70 to 80%. Entire terminals remain empty. Airlines are pulling out, and even cargo transport is being diverted to Canada or Europe. What might seem like a mere temporary turbulence is actually a deep earthquake in global air transportation, radically shaking the United States' position as a world power in trade and culture. When iconic airports like New York's JFK or Los Angeles International Airport, symbols of American greatness, are reduced to mere shadows of what they once were, a troubling question arises. Is the United States losing its international credibility, and is this just the beginning of a broader decline? This alarm signal repeats itself time and again in the latest data, revealed with transparency rarely seen in other media. Portland International Airport in Oregon used to be an example of innovation, sustainable design, and local creativity. International airlines like British Airways and Scandinavian Airlines operated direct flights, and European tourists valued Portland as an authentic American West experience. However, the current reality is different. The number of international passengers has dropped by 73%. Several boarding gates remain permanently closed, and the once vibrant International Departures Lounge now only echoes with the footsteps of a few. Instead of a dynamic cultural atmosphere, emptiness dominates. Even cargo companies avoid Portland, preferring destinations like Seattle or Vancouver, considered more reliable. This not only affects the city but disconnects the entire region from global trade, creating a silent but devastating form of isolation. On the East Coast, the situation is equally dramatic. New York's Liberty International Airport, once the preferred choice for business travelers seeking to avoid the chaos of JFK, is rapidly losing relevance. Since 2022, the flow of international passengers has dropped by 68%, Emirates has halved its flights, and European airlines have changed their routes. What worsens this situation is the damage to the image. Long waiting lines exceeding 2 hours, lost luggage, chaotic immigration processes. The first impression many visitors have of the United States is frustration, and this pattern goes far beyond the airports. The promise of efficiency, hospitality, and openness that defined America for decades is crumbling. Today, travelers compare cities like New York with destinations such as Dubai, Singapore, or Toronto, clearly choosing the latter over the United States. Boston's Logan Airport, near institutions like Harvard and MIT, was always a magnet for students, scientists, and cultural travelers. But here, too, the impact is felt. Since 2023, the number of international passengers has fallen by 59%. Delays in visa issuance, cancellations of direct flights to destinations like Dublin or Paris mean that families who once accompanied their children to elite universities now prefer Canada or Europe. It is an ironic paradox. American education, a global symbol of prestige for decades, is losing its luster due to its own bureaucracy. Hotels in Cambridge are half empty, restaurants are closing their doors as the entire value chain collapses. Miami International Airport, known as the historic gateway to Latin America, is facing an even more severe impact. The number of passengers from Brazil, Argentina, or Colombia has dropped by 64%. The question arises, why must American tourists endure long waits for visas, while Europe welcomes Latin American visitors without complicated procedures? As a result, affluent families from São Paulo or Buenos Aires prefer to fly to Lisbon or Madrid instead of Miami. In Florida, luxury helicopter services report significant drops, shopping centers look empty, and even cruises feel the decline in customers. On the other hand, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, long symbolizing adventure in the American Southwest, is experiencing a dramatic drop with a 62% reduction in international passengers since 2023. Regular group trips from Germany or the UK have disappeared, Lufthansa eliminated its connection to Frankfurt, and British Airways halved its flights to London. Ironically, Phoenix offers exactly what many foreign tourists seek: natural wonders like the Grand Canyon, authentic Old West culture, and luxurious resorts in Scottsdale. Yet travelers choose destinations like Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, which are more accessible, with fewer procedures and often more affordable. Hotels in Arizona report significant losses. Resorts are forced to focus mostly on domestic clients, while international presence almost completely vanishes. This situation is devastating for a state that always considered itself the gateway to the West, affecting not only Phoenix but also Utah, Nevada, and New Mexico, regions that traditionally relied on this city as an entry point. The situation in Texas is even more alarming. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, for decades one of the most important connection hubs in the world, is rapidly losing its global relevance, with a 57% drop in international passengers, especially from Asia and Europe. Airlines like Emirates and Korean Air have significantly reduced their flights. Even conferences and tech fairs that once attracted Dallas are being moved to Canada or Europe. Political factors also play a role: stricter controls, complicated visa processes, and distrust towards visitors from the Middle East or Latin America. For a region that sought to consolidate itself as a global trade center, this represents a severe blow. Hotels near the airport are half empty, international business travelers have decreased, and logistics giants like FedEx or UPS have moved their international sorting operations out of Dallas. Finally, the decline in Seattle-Tacoma is particularly painful. This airport, long a showcase of the U.S. Northwest, records a 69% drop in Asian passengers and a 54% drop in European ones. Seattle, home to giants like Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, and Boeing, was once a magnet for investors, tech workers, and tourists alike. However, geopolitical tensions, trade conflicts with China, and the decline in business travel due to remote work have dismantled these advantages. Airlines have responded with drastic cuts. All Nippon Airways canceled its Tokyo flight, Iceland Air suspended seasonal flights, and downtown Seattle hotels report losses. Iconic places like the Space Needle or Pike Place Market increasingly resemble empty stages, lacking the international audience that once made them vibrant. Neighboring regions like Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska also suffer because Seattle used to be their main connection abroad. A particularly emblematic case is Washington Dulles International, the air bridge to the U.S. Capitol. There, 65% of passengers were international, precisely where diplomats, ministers, and foreign delegations should land. Airlines such as Air France, Lufthansa, and Virgin Atlantic have reduced capacity or eliminated routes. The message to the world is devastating. Even in the capital, international connectivity becomes scarcer, more complicated, and less attractive, affecting hotels, restaurants, and cultural institutions like museums. Dallas thus becomes a symbol of the decline of U.S. soft power. When foreign visitors have to make stopovers in other countries or cities to reach Washington, not only does tourism value decrease, but also diplomatic exchange, cultural dialogue, and the image of the United States as an open world power weaken. If Washington loses its political relevance, Los Angeles International Airport represents the greatest cultural crisis. For decades, LAX was the gateway to Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and Californian dreams, but it has now experienced a 71% drop in international passengers. Especially visitors from Asia, the most important market for trans-Pacific travel, have drastically decreased. What was once a magnet for stars, entertainment, and lifestyle has become a complicated, costly, and unattractive destination. Airlines like Singapore Airlines and Cathay Pacific have considerably reduced their operations, while British Airways and Air France have cut frequencies. For Los Angeles, this means much more than fewer tourists. The entire entertainment industry loses its international projection. Streaming services and global film productions have made travel to Hollywood unnecessary, as fans can access content from anywhere in the world. The myth of Los Angeles as the unique center of American pop culture weakens. Hotels in Beverly Hills or Santa Monica remain empty. Luxury boutiques on Rodeo Drive report a drastic drop in international purchases, and even Disney and Universal Studios feel the absence of foreign visitors. More seriously, the cultural influence of the United States, its soft power through film, fashion, and lifestyle, diminishes when direct contact with Los Angeles disappears. However, the ultimate symbol of the U.S. decline in air transportation is New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. JFK was for decades the largest international hub in the United States, much more than just an airport, a monument to American global openness. Today, it represents the face of the crisis, a 78% drop in international passengers since 2023, the most drastic reduction in the history of American aviation. Entire terminals remain empty and immigration windows are unstaffed. Customs areas are signaling significant changes. Airlines are drastically reducing their operations, like Emirates, which is considerably adjusting its capacity. British Airways has cut its daily flights by 60%. Virgin Atlantic and Air France are joining efforts to optimize their resources. As a result, international business travelers are reconsidering their routes to New York. Major banks and investors question whether the city is still practically accessible as a global financial center. If flying directly to New York becomes more complicated and costly, the metropolis could lose part of its international prestige. This impact goes far beyond tourism. Fashion imports, financial documents, and even diplomatic shipments are no longer reliably managed through JFK. Companies like DHL, FedEx, and UPS are moving their international sorting centers to Canada or Europe. New York, which for decades was the global epicenter, risks losing its role as a key hub in international relations, just at a time when cities like Dubai, Singapore, or Istanbul are inaugurating ultra-modern airports that highlight the obsolescence of American infrastructures. This situation not only represents an economic disaster, but also carries strong symbolic significance. Airports in the United States have always been much more than just infrastructures. They have been the first impression, the business card, the emblematic image of the country. When cities like Portland, Miami, or Phoenix face difficulties, it can be considered a regional crisis. But if major centers like Los Angeles and New York are affected, the credibility of an entire nation is at stake. The similarities are clear. While American airports deteriorate, modern superhubs are emerging elsewhere in the world. In Asia, airports like Changi in Singapore or Incheon in South Korea are growing with futuristic terminals, ultra-fast processes, and a level of service that travelers in the United States can only imagine. In Europe, cities like Istanbul, Madrid, or Frankfurt are investing billions to increase capacity and improve comfort, capturing international passengers. In the Middle East, Doha and Dubai aspire to be connection points between East and West, achieving this goal with determination. For international airlines, the choice is clear. Why invest in JFK or LAX when there are new, modern, efficient, and welcoming hubs? This global competition reflects how the United States is losing its role as a travel destination and commercial center. Just a few years ago, America was a place desired by millions of tourists, a platform for business, and an educational center for students worldwide. However, today travel agencies and tourism associations report an unstoppable trend. Customers deliberately avoid American airports. The reasons are not limited to long waits or high costs, but also to the image they project. International media abound with reports of chaotic situations, overwhelmed security authorities, bureaucracy, and a lack of friendliness. For the economy, this loss of relevance has devastating consequences. International conferences that were once held smoothly in New York, Boston, or Dallas are now moving to cities like Toronto, London, or Singapore. Large multinational corporations are reducing their business trips to the United States as they find more efficient options. Hotels that for decades depended on international travelers have to close their doors or lower their rates. Restaurants, luxury stores, and cultural spaces lose visitors who used to spend thousands of dollars on each stay. The decrease in freight transport is even more worrying. Airports like LAX or JFK used to be nerve centers for high-value products, from electronics and fashion to pharmaceuticals. However, delays, security demands, and the loss of direct routes have made supply chains unreliable. Logistics companies are diverting their operations to Canadian ports and airports, from Vancouver to Toronto and Montreal. For the United States, this represents not only an economic loss but also a decrease in strategic control over global distribution chains. In the cultural sphere, the domino effect is also evident. The drop in tourism to cities like Los Angeles reduces Hollywood's direct influence on global culture. The decrease in international students in Boston affects Harvard's global presence. When diplomats avoid Dallas, Washington's attraction as a global capital weakens. It is not just about numbers or statistics, but the slow decline of American soft power, that intangible influence that for decades marked the difference between the United States and other nations. While all this happens, international competitors accelerate their advances. Canada presents itself as a safe and open alternative. Europe takes advantage of the opportunity to capture visitor flows. Asia develops landmark projects that set new standards. America's old gateways to the world remain empty, and it seems the world has already decided where the future is headed. The Hui crisis of American airports goes beyond a simple logistical challenge. It reflects the global loss of relevance of the United States. For years, the United States was synonymous with international travel, a land of unlimited opportunities, and a magnet for tourists, entrepreneurs, and students alike. Today, the numbers tell a different story. A 70 to 80% drop in international passengers, drastic cuts in airlines, hotels with occupancy below 50%, and commercial and dining districts struggling to survive. What once seemed unbreakable now looks like a house of cards wobbling before global competition. The symbolism of this situation is particularly alarming. Airports are the first and last impression visitors take away from a country. Arriving in Dubai means encountering efficiency and luxury. In Singapore, travelers are welcomed with kindness and cutting-edge technology. But landing in New York or JFK often involves long lines, unfriendly staff, mishandled luggage, and chaotic processes. This contrasting image affects how the world perceives the United States. It is not just about deciding whether someone takes a vacation or a business trip. It is about trust, respect, and prestige. The geopolitical repercussions are profound. When international diplomats avoid landing directly in Washington, when investors shy away from New York and Latin American tourists prefer flying to Lisbon or Madrid, the global power map begins to transform. Trade agreements, investment decisions, and even cultural collaborations are increasingly established without the participation of the United States. This nation, which for a long time defined the rules of global exchange, now risks being displaced. Just a few years ago, such scenarios seemed unimaginable. However, reality indicates that American infrastructure is obsolete. Political decisions have undermined confidence, while international rivals seize every opportunity to expand their advantage. Airports are just the visible part of a much larger iceberg that gradually undermines the influence of the United States. For the millions of Americans who depend directly on tourism, trade, and international traffic, this situation is a nightmare. From the hotel employee in Miami, to the restaurant owner in Portland, to the manager of a logistics company in Dallas, everyone feels the impact. Jobs are lost, and entire economic sectors are affected. regional identities are beginning to fade, losing their place on the international stage. And the crucial question remains, is it possible to stop this decline? Can the United States, with massive investments, reforms, and a renewed focus on international exchange, reclaim its image as the global gateway? Or are we witnessing in real time how a world power closes its doors while other nations take the keys to the future? The answer will not only define how we travel in the coming years, but also whether America will manage to maintain its role as a cultural, economic, and political leader, or if the 21st century will mark the rise of other centers of power. What do you think? Are the United States facing a historic turning point, or is there still an opportunity for a comeback?